Hi, I'm Katie, Flower Mama, and I'm here to teach you how to make an evergreen wreath. So these are perfect for the holidays, and you can easily make your own. I'm going to show you how. What you need is a wire wreath form, and you can get these at the dollar store. Pretty simple. This one actually had an extra layer on the outside that I went ahead and clipped off before the camera started rolling here. Because to me, like, it's just nice to have less of this bulkiness here to try and fill up. So this I'm gonna set off to the side. Here's what we're working with. You'll need paddle wire. This is 24 gauge. You'll need a clippers. I like this heavy duty pruners as opposed to snips, because you're gonna be dealing with branches and woody material. You'll need your wire cutters. I used that already to cut off the outer layer here. You may need some Oasis floral glue for the last step, or some hot glue if we want to glue things on at the end. And now let's go over the materials we'll be using. So this is redwood. I really like redwood because it's the leaves are flat, so it's really easy to work with. And this is some kind of like arborvitae. I picked this from a garden that I manage around here. It's got these really cute little pine cones up on here, so I'm excited to use that. And other greens that work well are cedar and pine with the long needles. I'm gonna give you a list of different greeneries and branches that you can use. I also have here some bay leaves. Bay leaves are really wonderful. They're broadleaf, so they take up space when you're arranging. And olive leaves, these are also pretty fun. And then here, this is one of my favorites. This is Eleagnus, or silver leaf, because the underside of the leaves are this really like silvery, kind of shimmery, beautiful leaf. So I'm excited to use some of these. These are just more redwood pieces that I have cut already. And I have peppers. These are little chili peppers grown locally from Good Humus Farm. I'm excited to potentially use some of these as well. We have oak branches. You can definitely use oak leaves in making this. Sometimes it's nice if you're making these wreaths a little later in the year when the oak leaves have started to go a little bit brown. It's just some added texture, but they're pretty like this too. And these are toyon berries, a California native here. These are also nice to use for certain texture and to bring in that pop of red. If you are going for the more traditional kind of Christmassy wreath, it is good to use some kind of pine, some like redwood or fir, and then have your pop of red, chili peppers, toyon berries. And over here, I have some celosia. These are a dried flower. These are little things we can glue in afterwards if we want, and these, even though they're a little bit more pink, kind of set against the green and the silvery, they give you that pop of red. And these are the straw flowers, also beautiful for that. And some gomphrena. Gomphrena is globe amaranth. These are some dried flowers too, like if you want to add more white into your wreath. Also cotton, I don't have any on hand right now, but cotton looks really beautiful. Pine cones, of course, and some orange slices. These can also be fun to add into the mix. And so I will just say one note about gathering your materials. If you are foraging, that's absolutely wonderful, but to forage in a mindful way. So never to take too much, more than you need. And then always, when I go out and forage, I trim the lower branches of the trees. And if I am going to trim a lower branch, to do so closer to the trunk rather than leaving this like blunt edge sticking out of the tree, if that makes sense. If you see some good material on someone else's property, just ask for permission to clip a little bit. I got permission for all of these things that I've foraged or bought. Another good thing is if you are making your wreath closer to the holiday time, a lot of times places that sell Christmas trees will have bottoms for you like this, because when they saw off the Christmas tree, they often take off the bottom branches so that it's just easier for you, the customer, to take your tree away. And so a lot of times those bottom branches just go in bins that get dumped in the compost. So if you go to your local garden center or wherever they're selling Christmas trees, you can ask for some of their bottom branch trimmings and make a really beautiful wreath with those. So this redwood here, I left this one intact to show you how I'm going to break it down, because this is going to be our main greenery. And these are pieces I've already broken down. You can see I like to get these to be maybe 4 to 5 inches or so, like really not too long of pieces. That's kind of perfect right there. And so for this, I'll go through and do the same, and you can see I can get quite a lot off one branch to use. So for making your wreath, you probably need, I'd say 3 to 5 like really good bushy branches of some kind of main greenery, like this pine or cedar or even bay. So if you don't want your wreath to look super like Christmassy, you can definitely make it with alternative greens that won't lend it to being super Christmassy. Like for example, bay. An all bay leaf can be really, really beautiful. So just all bay, and then let's say you come in with some orange slices, that can be really elegant and doesn't really have a Christmassy vibe. Alternatively, olive. All olive could be really cool, or bay and olive together. These aren't really traditional Christmas. So if you wanted to make a wreath for like Hanukkah, let's say, you can definitely keep out the pine. That would make it look less Christmassy, and focus more on your alternative leaves. Maybe even this silver leaf, this Eleagnus, is really beautiful. So this maybe with some of the blues. Well, that looks pretty green, but these I don't know if they're showing up. They have a little bluish tint to them. Eucalyptus is also great. Eucalyptus is a wonderful greenery and dries nicely. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I like to bring out a little bit of the paddle wire, but not a lot. I want to actually keep most of the wire on the paddle as I'm working with it. And I'm going to start with these leaves here, and I'm just kind of getting a pile in my hand. And now with this, I'll set this down for a second and show you. I'm going to create like a little tail off the edge of this wire, and this tail is going to point the same direction as the stems that you're placing down on your wreath. And when you're working, I should say that this wreath form has two sides. It has a side that's indented a little bit more, and then the other side is like beveled up. And you want to work on the side that's indented a little bit more. It's got more of that shape to hold your materials rather than opposed to the rounded side. So I'm placing the little tail the same direction that the stems go. And I'm going to have to wrap it a few times. Ooh, I just bent that one there. Just don't pull too tight. And so I'm keeping that together. Actually, I'm going to clip some of this silver tree because I'm excited to use that. And you can see with this one stem here, I just got 3 pieces off it from where I clipped. And so this is actually an important step. Just like I already prepped all of this material, the redwood, you want to go ahead and prep your greens to be a workable size for you. And so then you have just these piles ready to pick up from and work. And this is a step you can definitely do in advance. If I knew I was going to make a lot of wreaths today, then, you know, yesterday I could have, like, I prepped those ahead of time. You can prep your greens a day ahead of time and keep them cool and fresh. I'm going to go ahead and take a couple of these and get them on there, and I'm putting them in a way where the silver part of the leaf is showing, because that's just the really beautiful part. You'll find these wreaths kind of take a lot of material. And you can see I'm holding the paddle wire pretty close to the wreath form itself, and that's what allows me to pull it tight. These don't take as long as other wreaths do. And so here you can see, like, I'm using my hand as this kind of fan shape. I mean, in my mind I am, but you can see, like, the greens span, like, the width of my hand. I'm looking to get some greens on the outside as well as on the inside of the wreath, because that's going to allow for a really full look and minimize any gaps that you have. I'm going to come over here and see what this looks like. This green may be a little too chartreuse for my liking, but, like, I really love these little pine cones. So I'm going to use some of these anyways and see how that ends up turning out. You don't really need to wrap too much. You can see I'm wrapping once, maybe twice around my stems. And as long as you're pulling tight, you don't have to wrap too much. I'm going to move some of my pile directly in front of me so it's just easier to grab. In my mind, I'm already kind of deciding how I want this to go, and I'll talk you through it a little bit. So I don't have a lot of these little pine cone things, and so I want to use them a little bit sparingly. So rather than placing them all the way throughout like I am these other types of greenery, I'm going to do them in clusters of 5. And this is a rule of design in which things in 3 or 5 look really good on wreaths. Even 1, like a focal center, or 3 or 5, things in odd numbers are really pleasing to the eye, especially in a round formation. If you were to do a square wreath, then definitely you could do things in like 2 or 4 to make your eye go around the square. But so here I already have 1, and so I'm thinking here I'm going to do a second one, a third one, and a 4th one, and a 5th one here. So I'm already in my mind telling myself, oh, there's going to be 5 of these in here, and so I want to space them kind of accordingly. And so that's about where they're going to end up in this wreath when I'm done. And now I don't think I'm actually going to use the peppers in this wreath today, but with the peppers, it would look really good if, like, let's say I had 1 focal, or 1, 2, 3, spaced kind of evenly around the wreath, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would look a lot better. And we can go over this again too, like once the wreath is completed, and you'll see more of that. So I'm going to keep on working here. Just wanted to give you a little insight into what my mind is doing when I looked at that and saw I didn't have a whole lot. And when I'm making these wreaths, I personally like to use about 3 different types of greenery. So even though I showed you more greenery here, I'm not using all of them. I'm not using the olive or the bay or the oak branches. I'm focused here with the redwood, the Aleagnus, and this little arborvitae. And to me that just helps give a good base to the wreath. It's got different texture already with these leaves and different coloring in the leaves without really kind of overdoing it. Because at the end we're going to come in with some of our fun items like pine cones or orange slices. And so I don't want this wreath to be too busy off the bat with lots of different types of greenery. That's just me and a design thing. You may choose to have a lot of different types of greenery, and it may still be very beautiful. So you can see I'm like just overlaying the leaves over the stems that I had recently wrapped, and that's kind of what you want to go for here, is to just overlay, and keep the stems pointing all in the same direction. Again, I prepped this all ahead of time and I kept it in my cooler, but if you don't have a cooler, you can still prep ahead of time and keep them in a cooler location. Maybe somewhere in your house, a basement, a storage shed, a pantry, something that's a little bit cooler. Making sure to pull tight every time. These stems can handle it. They're pretty woody and thick, so you can definitely pull tight and not worry too much about any breakage happening. I'm going to leave that and go ahead and clip some more of this silver tree, because I like the tips of it that are smaller leaves. When I'm arranging my wreaths, I like to think of just like the few different kinds of greeneries. I like to make sure those greeneries have different leaf shapes and textures and colors. If you do have long stems, feel free to cut them as you're going along. I haven't really had to do that because I've cut all of these mostly to their length. And as you're designing, you can definitely choose to use some leaves flipped over on their back side versus their front side. Especially like the back side of pine, it has a different color than the tops ever so slightly, and so you can allow yourself more variation in color by doing that just real simply if you don't have that much greenery material, but still want to have some variation. Now we're getting close to the end here. This is the part that's always a little bit more tough. Your stems that you put in will essentially be running into the stems you first laid down. And so it's important to make sure your stems are cut kind of short as you get to the end. And you want to tuck some stems under here. So like for this one's kind of long, but it's really beautiful and I want to use it. So I'm going to take that stem and tuck it underneath. And I want that silver leaf on top, so I'm just rearranging there. Time for the fifth little piece here. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. I might want to put another little piece of greenery tucked in here. Again, just tucking the stems under wherever I can. And then kind of maneuvering that around. There we go. So then I'm going to pull this. I see a stem sticking out here. I'm going to cut that real quick. So I'm going to give myself a little more slack here by pulling this and cutting it about here. So I've given myself a little bit more and I'm going to finish it off. But it looks like to me I need one more leaf. at least, right here. So this wire kind of works its way through to the back. Pulls. And then I thread it underneath some of the other wire, even the frame itself and what I've wrapped, and I just pull. And I'll do this a couple more times. This is what's gonna make it pretty secure. And again, always making sure to use my wire cutters so I don't mess with the integrity of my pruners. It really wears down your pruners quickly to use it on wire. So I just tuck that back in there. And essentially here we have our base. And now I'll get this area cleaned up and then we can talk about filling in some gaps and how to put on the pine cones and orange slices and all that fun stuff. Alright, so now that you have finished the base of your wreath, it's time to add some of the fun things. I'm excited to add the pine cones, and so I'll show you how I do that. You grab your paddle wire and give yourself maybe like that much, like your forearm to hand of a measurement. And now these are little pine cones. You'll need kind of longer wire if you have bigger pine cones. And I just flip this over here and I try and get the wire underneath some of these little pine cone leaves. I don't know what the word is for these. So I'm going to get the wire underneath some of these pine cones here and then just bring it in at the center like that and twist it. Like that. And I'm gonna go ahead and make 3 of them. And before I attach these, because I know I want the pine cones to be on the wreath, I'll show you how to do the orange slices as well, very similarly. And these orange slices are from last year, so they're like not the most vibrant in color, but I made them by slicing on a mandolin, very thin slices of orange, and then drying them in my dehydrator. But if you didn't have a dehydrator, you could definitely use the oven at a very low setting, and just make sure to check on them. So I'm taking this wire and I'm poking it through the fleshy part of the orange and about halfway here, and then I'm bringing that down like I did with the pine cone and twisting. So that's how you make your orange slice. And for the orange slices, it'd be pretty fun to, like, you know, if these wanted to go in the wreath, it looks pretty good like that. I could aim for them to be, well, that's 4, see, and I don't have a 5th one out here. That doesn't look as good. So if I take one away and space them more equally apart, there's 3. That looks better to me. Or you could take them and cluster them all in one side like that. That looks pretty good, as just like one little focal point of oranges. And I'm not going to attach this because I rather do the pine cones, but you attach this orange exactly how I'm going to show you with the pine cones here. Let's take this big one. And I'm going to go ahead and cut these 2 wires to be the same size because I just know it's easier to work with when the wires are the same. And so you position your pine cone where you want it, and you just poke the 2 pieces through and you find where they're coming out in the back. So here they came out. And then you just twist them around each other. Tuck the ends of the wire back into the wreath itself. It's that easy. And now I'm going to see where I want these other pine cones to do. I'm doing 3 because things look better in odd numbers. So that looks pretty good to me there. I'm going to go ahead and take this and cut this the same length as well. I have a lot of extra wire here, so I'm going to cut the extra bits and then tuck it back into the wreath itself, flip it over, and attach my last one. So there we have that. Looks pretty good with the 3 pine cones equally spaced, and then the 5 of these little pine cones. I'm not going to glue anything on this today, but I will talk about that. If you wanted to glue on some pieces, like dried flowers, that's totally doable. You can't really wire on heads like this, so they need to be glued. You could use this Oasis floral adhesive glue, or you could use hot glue. Both work equally as well. This stuff smells kind of bad, so it's good to do it outside in an open air environment. But if you were going to glue this stuff and use this, it's good to have a container to set it up in so the glue doesn't kind of get anywhere, and a little wet cloth to wipe the tip of it as you're gluing. But this is celosia, a dried flower, and you can kind of just position these pieces where you might like to have them throughout your wreath, and then pick them up and glue them a little bit and hold them on there for a couple seconds. The same is true for the straw flower or the Gomphrena. If you wanted little pieces of the white in there, or more of this like burgundy red color, you could glue some straw flower pieces on. So you could have fun with dried flowers too in your evergreen wreaths. But I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm going to call this one complete. And so now I get to decide what is the top and what is the bottom of the wreath. It's always hard to make this decision. And then when I think I've figured it out, I haven't. I keep flipping. Okay, I think maybe that's it. This is the top and this is the bottom. And so then you flip it over very gently and carefully. Grab your paddle wire again. Here's the diameter of the wreath. You want to make it like about two of the diameters of the wreath. You'll make a little tail here. And I always try and get it under the frame itself, as well as some of the wire that I had wrapped with. You want to make sure to kind of pull those tight, and then give it some slack up here, because you don't want to see the wire when it's hanging. If I pulled it too tight and the wire was straight, you would see that through the wreath. So I pull it tight, and then I push the wire up a little bit closer to the frame, and then I call that good. So I fold over my pieces there. And then this, I'm literally just wrapping the excess wire around the main wire that we're hanging it from. And this just gives some reinforcement to it. These wreaths are a lot heavier than, let's say, a lavender wreath or a dried flower wreath, because it is fresh material. And so there's a lot of moisture, and it's heavier, and it just needs this extra reinforcement. There we go. You can see then this is what I would hang it on. And this is ready for the door. Now in terms of pricing, you can see different prices kind of across the board for these evergreen wreaths. Kind of standard is anywhere from like $45 to $55 or $60 for a wreath like this, depending on the size. But that's what I would sell this as. I would sell this as like $55 perhaps. And there's your fresh evergreen wreath, and this is going to dry beautifully like this as well. And if you want to keep it fresh longer, you can spritz it with just water, and if you don't want it to dry right away. There are some materials you can use to like shine up the leaves and preserve them, but I don't recommend or use any of those kind of spray materials to keep a wreath nice. Just water, and then let it dry and enjoy it over the holiday season.